Welcome to Bible for Modern Minds podcast.
Today, we're doing a bit of a different deep dive. We're not really here to, argue about whether God exists.
No, not at all. Our mission is, I think, a lot more interesting.
Right. We want to understand the human impulse to believe. Why do we do it?
Exactly. We're looking at this as a philosophical and psychological question. Why is faith so central to the human story? Why does this idea of something transcendent just refuse to go away no matter how advanced we get?
Yeah, and we've pulled from a whole stack of sources here, philosophy, psychology, logic, all trying to get at the internal logic of faith. So the big question for you is this. If belief is often called irrational, a bug in the system,
It's a flaw.
why is it so incredibly universal? Why is it woven into our consciousness, our morals, our hopes?
Because if it were truly just irrational, you'd expect it to be, a fad. Something that comes and goes.
A local phenomenon.
Exactly. But our sources suggest something else. They point to belief not as something we invented, but as a natural result of being human, that we're sort of designed to reach for something more.
Okay, so let's start there with just how consistent this is globally. I mean, you look at history, anthropology, it's everywhere. Every ancient civilization, every isolated tribe we've ever found, they all show signs of belief in a higher power.
That universality is really the key. It's what separates it from, say, a simple superstition. The sources we looked at argue that faith isn't an add-on, something you learn. It's more like a built-in feature.
A built-in feature. I like that. That's a powerful claim because it's saying you don't need a specific book or a teacher to bring it to you.
It doesn't seem like you do. We see in the anthropological record that isolated groups who've had no contact with major world religions, they often develop these core beliefs on their own.
Like what kind of beliefs?
Well, often a belief in a creator or some kind of first cause, a sense of a higher moral authority that's, bigger than just the tribe's rules, and crucially, a belief in life after death.
You mentioned archaeology before. What's the hard evidence that makes people say we woke up already believing?
It's the intentionality. It shows up almost as soon as modern human behavior does. We find these really elaborate burials from tens of thousands of years ago.
Yep.
And they're not just holes in the ground. They're done with immense care, with ritual symbols, sacred objects placed with the body. They were clearly preparing the dead for a journey.
So they didn't just leave them.
No, they invested time and energy, which suggests a deep, early assumption that, this life isn't the end of the story.
So it's almost like language or music.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to be taught that music exists. It just emerges.
That is the perfect analogy. Our brains seem wired for grammar and rhythm, and in the same way, there seems to be something in the human psyche, some philosophers call it the sensus divinitatis, that just naturally reaches for the transcendent. It's the engine for our biggest questions.
So if it's built in, what is that mechanism inside us? What's the inner awareness that pushes us in that direction?
Right. So now we're moving from looking at cultures to looking inside ourselves. And that mechanism is often described as this intuitive inner awareness, a sense of the transcendent.
Okay, transcendent is a big word. What does that feel like for you listening at home?
It's that feeling that there's something more, a higher order, a deeper meaning to things, a source beyond just what we can see and touch.
Yeah, I think everyone gets that feeling of awe when you look at the stars, or that gut punch of moral outrage when you see real injustice.
And that pull is driven by these really deep human desires that, frankly, the material world just can't satisfy. We want absolute justice, not just temporary fixes. We long for unconditional love, for a meaning that death can't erase, for immortality.
If you think humans are just, complex biological machines, those desires become a huge evolutionary problem.
A massive one.
Why would nature give us this deep, unquenchable thirst for things that don't exist?
Exactly. Our search for meaning and immortality is kind of the ultimate counter-argument to a purely material world. We feel that if things like truth and justice are worth striving for, they must be real, and if they're real, they must be grounded in something ultimate.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because our very existence becomes the prompt. The fact that we're even here to ask the question pushes the mind toward a first cause.
Absolutely. When your mind really confronts the mystery of being, you always land on two questions. Why is there something instead of nothing? And why am I here?
And those questions just naturally point you toward needing some kind of ultimate foundation, a first cause,
And you can't talk about that foundation without talking about conscience.
the inner witness.
It's maybe the most direct one.
Yeah.
That instinctive moral compass. We feel guilt, we feel responsibility, that sense of ought, that we should do good and avoid evil.
And it feels like it comes from somewhere beyond just what society taught us. It feels authoritative.
It does.
You know?
And that authoritative sense points toward a higher moral authority, a lawgiver. It suggests we're accountable to something or someone beyond ourselves.
Okay, so we've laid out the historical and internal drive. Now let's flip it. Let's talk about why purely material explanations, that everything is just atoms and energy, why they keep falling short.
Right. So first we got to be clear what we mean by materialism. It's the worldview that says the only things that exist are matter and energy, your thoughts, your feelings. They're just complex chemical reactions. You're basically a meat computer.
So what does that worldview just fail to explain about our daily lives?
Oh, it fails spectacularly on all the things that actually make life meaningful. Consciousness itself, morality, meaning, beauty, free will.
Yeah, you can't find the feeling of red in a brain scan. You can only see the brain activity associated with it.
Exactly. The why is completely missing. And when materialism tells you you are just chemicals, your life is a meaningless accident, our entire being just screams back, no, I am more than that.
So belief in God, in this view, isn't an escape from reason.
It's an escape from emptiness. It's a rejection of a worldview that strips life of its value because that worldview just doesn't match our deepest experience of reality.
So let's get into the logic. How is belief in a timeless, spaceless cause actually rational?
The structure is pretty compelling. First, cosmology tells us the universe had a beginning. Anything that begins to exist needs a cause. So the universe needs a cause outside of itself.
A cause that has to be timeless and non-material. Otherwise, it would just be part of the universe it's supposed to have created.
Precisely. And second, our experience of things like objective morality and reason, well, they need a transcendent, intelligent foundation to make sense. If morality is just opinion, why do we argue so passionately about what's right and wrong?
So what you're saying is that belief in God becomes the most coherent explanation. It explains both the physical universe, the cause, and our human experience, the meaning.
That's the logical conclusion our sources draw. But we have to tackle the word faith itself. Most people hear blind faith.
Believing with no evidence.
Right. But that's not the definition being used here. A better definition is reasonable trust.
Okay.
It's trusting what's reasonable to believe, even if you can't prove it in a lab. You trust your friends. You trust the pilot when you get on a plane. That's reasonable trust, based on evidence and experience. Faith becomes rational when it explains the world better than the alternatives and when it lines up with our deepest intuitions.
So let's put that to the test. If we're looking for the most coherent explanation, what happens when you put a theistic framework next to a purely atheistic one?
The contrast is pretty stark, especially on origins. The atheistic view basically says the universe came from literal nothing, consciousness is an accident, morality is subjective, and our deepest longings are just evolutionary illusions.
And that from nothing idea is a real philosophical hurdle, isn't it?
It's a non-starter. True nothingness is the absence of everything. No laws, no energy, no potential. To say that our incredibly fine-tuned mathematical universe just popped out of non-being, that requires a much bigger leap of faith than believing in an eternal, intelligent cause.
Let's bring this back to consciousness, because you said that's one of the strongest arguments.
I think it is. The universe is almost entirely non-conscious matter. Rocks, gas, space. The idea that self-aware thought and subjective experience just emerged from matter that has none of those properties is, from a materialist view, almost inexplicable.
So to put it simply, if reality began with a mind, then minds showing up later is what you'd expect.
Exactly. Mind from matter is a huge accident. Matter from mind is a logical expectation. You see the same problem with morality. Sure, evolution can explain cooperation. It helps us survive. But it can't explain why we think cooperation is morally good.
Or why people will sacrifice their own survival for something like justice or truth. That goes against pure biological utility.
It totally does. If morality was just a trick our DNA played on us to survive, a successful lie would be a good thing. But our conscience says no. We act as if morality is real and binding, not just useful, which points to a source for that morality beyond ourselves.
Which brings us back to psychology. If we are wired this way, is this desire for God a malfunction, or is it a signal?
The sources argue strongly that it's a signal. The analogy they use is hunger. Hunger points to the existence of food. The solution isn't to deny your hunger, it's to find what it's signaling for. Belief, in this view, satisfies these core human needs for meaning, moral order, hope, and connection.
If we were just physical beings, this universal longing for the infinite would be the biggest design flaw in history.
A cruel joke by evolution for sure. Instead, when we have profound experiences like suffering or seeing immense beauty, our minds automatically go beyond the material. Suffering shows us the limits of our own control.
And when our answers run out, we look for hope from somewhere bigger.
We do, and beauty does the same thing, but from the opposite direction. A beautiful piece of music or an incredible sunset, it kind of whispers, this world is not random. It awakens that longing for the infinite source of all that goodness.
So, what's the takeaway for daily life? What are the practical, tangible benefits here?
The practical power is undeniable. Even secular psychology admits it. Faith provides an anchor. It gives you hope in suffering, moral clarity, emotional stability, and a sense of peace that's rooted in a purpose bigger than your own problems.
And the research backs that up, right? Studies show people with strong faith are often more resilient. They live longer, handle stress better.
They do, because faith gives them a coherent story for their lives. It doesn't mean the storms won't come, but it gives you a foundation that doesn't crumble when they hit. It shapes everything about how you think and feel.
Wow. Okay, this has been a really fascinating journey. We've covered a ton of ground. The universality of belief, the inner witness of conscience, the logic of faith, the psychology of meaning. The conclusion from these sources is pretty clear. Belief is universal, it's logically coherent, it's psychologically necessary, and it's existentially stabilizing.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to take away. If the human mind is universally wired for relationship, and if personal experience is seen as a valid form of knowledge in science, in law, in philosophy...
Right. Why is the spiritual realm the only place where that internal shared human experience is just dismissed?
It suggests that faith, when it combines reason, intuition, and experience, isn't a blind leap in the dark at all. It's arguably the most holistic and comprehensive choice for making sense of reality. Something to think about as you navigate the big questions in your own life.